Okay, today's Q&A is about liver, and the person bought liver, and on the liver there was a note that said that it was kashered after being frozen. And what does that mean? Why do I care if it was frozen before it was kashered? So to answer the question, we're going to start with a little bit of background. Is that about getting blood out of meat in general? So for most meat, the way we kasher something, the way we get the blood out of it, is through malicha, by salting it, which means you soak it in water for about half an hour, then you cover it with salt on all sides, then it sits in that salt for about an hour, and then you rinse off the salt 3 times in water. So that's for most meat, that's how you kasher it. But liver can't be kashered with salt, and the only way to kasher it is by broiling it over an open fire. Now, you could use broiling for regular meat also, but it's not very common. But for liver, that's the only way that you can kasher. Now, exactly how you broil meat or liver to kasher it is not for today's discussion. In fact, most kosher supermarkets won't even sell you a piece of liver that hasn't been kashered. There used to be such a thing, but nowadays it's very uncommon that a kosher store would sell you that. So for most people, knowing how to kasher a piece of liver is not something practical or something they're ever going to do. So the general rule for meat when you kasher is that you have to kasher it within 3 days after the shechita. If you didn't kasher it within 3 days, then there's 2 things that go on. First is, the only way to get the blood out is by broiling it. I mean, you don't have an option anymore of salting it. You must broil it. And second thing is, once you broil it, you cannot cook that meat like in water or something like that. Okay? Now, there's a discussion, the person can talk about whether that 3-day clock, what I said, after 3 days you have these 2 restrictions, whether that stops if you froze the meat along the way. Meaning, if after a day you froze it, would that give you more time? Instead of just 3 days, you get longer, and most people are machmir about that question. So therefore, as a rule, meat has to be kasher within 72 hours of the shechita. Even if it's frozen in the middle, it makes no difference. 72 hours is as much as you get. There is a way to extend it through soaking and rinsing and washing. That's not for today either. But that's a general rule. It has to be done within 72 hours, and freezing does not. Most assume freezing does not extend that. Now, everything I said till now is about regular meat. But liver is a little bit different. So liver doesn't have an option of being kashered by salting. It must be broiled. And there's a machlokes whether if you broil the liver after 3 days, if you can cook it. Meaning, for regular meat, you have to salt it within 3 days. If you didn't, you must broil it. But liver, you always have to broil. So what happens if you broil it after 3 days? So the shach says, same as other meat. If more than 3 days pass before you broiled it, then it can't be cooked. You can't cook it in water afterwards. But the Kashrus says, no, the whole 3-day rule doesn't apply to liver at all, because the 3-day rule really is most relating to salting and has nothing to do with liver at all. And therefore, even if after 3 days pass and if you kashered it, meaning by broiling, you can still cook it afterwards if you want to. So hashkachos take different positions on this shaila, but whether they'll let a restaurant cook liver if it was broiled after 3 days, they take different positions about that. And if you want to know what to do, usually ask your rabbi what should you do, or ask your local vad what their standard are, and then ask your vad what their standard is to know whether you should or shouldn't be eating that food. Now, getting back to the original question, if the packaged liver says it was kasher after being frozen, why are they telling me that? But what they're trying to say to you is like this: more than 3 days passed after the liver, from between the shechita before it was broiled. But in the part of that time, it was frozen. So now there's extra information, which is one is that more than 3, probably it means to say is that more than 3 days passed, so you might not want to cook it at all. But there's a mitigating factor over here, which is the fact that it was frozen as part of that time, which according to some always helps extend the time. That you should know that also applies here to this piece of meat as well, and that might be an extra reason to say that you should be allowed to cook it.